The road to oppression is the silence of the rest of us. This piece of legislation that's being pushed through Parliament at the moment will say that you can only have a demonstration with the agreement of the police if they approve it, and that you're silent if you're outside here. Things. This is a very, very dangerous and very slippery slope.
Everyone has different views on protesting and its impact. There are those who view it to create systematic change within society, and there are those who feel indifferent about it. And then there are some who feel like it's ineffective and causes more harm than good. The recent Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill will have a huge impact on protesting and giving the police greater authority. For example, the crime bill includes a 10-year sentence for causing damages to statues and memorials, most likely in response to the toppling of the slave trader Edward Colston during the Black Lives Matter movement in Bristol last year. Many see the crime bill as a way of silencing voices. Others see it as a way to protect the public, or are in favour of the bill because they hold different political ideologies. Despite the various opinions on protesting, protests have contributed greatly to the society we live in today, and we would not have many things without them. There are many examples of protests and movements that created change. The women's suffrage movement between 1832 and 1951 enabled women to vote, which was a massive step forward in the liberation of women's voices. However, only those who owned a property and were aged 30 were able to vote. Thanks to the suffrage movement, all female British citizens are allowed to vote, and 34% of MPs currently in the House of Commons are female. The first UK Gay Pride March occurred in London in 1972, where only 1,000 people marched. Pride is now an annual event celebrating the LGBTQ+ community, with around 1.5 million people at 2019 London Pride. Recently, there has been an uproar concerning the police's treatment that questions their credibility that people cannot ignore anymore. The death of George Floyd in the US sparked Black Lives Matter protests across the UK, highlighting the racism within society and that the UK is not innocent when it comes to systematic racism. Also, the death of Sarah Everard, who was murdered by a Metropolitan Police officer, illustrated the violence against women at the hands of men and the police abuse of power. With the increasing number of protests within the last 2 years, we want to find out why protests are on the rise and whether the crime bill will hinder the expression of voice. What led you to start protesting?
Well, I think it comes from a sort of wider context of the pandemic. The Black Lives Matter protests happened last year, and we saw the backlash from that from the government. The pandemic has only been a catalyst for more criticism of the government. But when the bill was first introduced, that was one thing. When the Sarah Everard Clapham Common vigil got trampled on and the government responded in the way they did, that was another thing. And combined, as well as everything else in the world, you can't sit back anymore. It's sort of your moral duty to step up and say, this ain't right. I need to use my privilege and my sort of moral compass to express what I believe in. And I believe that the bill is heinous and that we need to smash it down.
It's definitely roused up feelings for I think a lot of people who sort of presumed that they were limited by their freedom of speech. From the control that the police now have, it's pretty scary, some of the consequences. You can argue that it is for safety measures in the time we're in, but the way it's been passed, it seems like it's not going away after that either.
I think that there is so much inequality, there's so much discrimination and injustice. I mean, it's 2021 in this century. We shouldn't still be grappling with issues like this. I think for me and many other people around the world, it was the killing of George Floyd. I think that was a turning point for so many people. Not that I didn't know that there was inequality or there was unlawful killings of unarmed Black people, but this was just so in your face.
I think if something directly affects me, I'll definitely get more politically engaged. Like with the Black Lives Matter movement, I was on the verge of going, yeah, I'll get involved in that. Because although I'm mixed race, I'm not black, I don't really associate. But then if, say, it was like talking about those of mixed heritage, those of ethnic minorities, then yeah, I probably would have taken more of a stance on it because I was bringing awareness to a larger group which I'm involved in. But with it's just Black Lives Matter, that's not me, that's someone else.
You find people who come at it with a different viewpoint and who come at it with a different forefront in mind. You know, there may be a trans person who believes in trans liberation more so than, not that I don't believe in trans liberation, but that I take something else, but because they are trans and that's their experience, that's their forefront.
Obviously there was the events in Bristol where things went a little bit sour, a little bit more aggressive than you'd hope.
I can understand the conflict of slave traders and slavery and that racial discrimination. And having a slave trader statue, well, which should have been taken out a long time ago, especially as we're moving forwards with this day and age where it's a lot more diverse. That's a good thing. But the way they've gone around taking it down themselves and not going through the right legal measures is where that creates conflict. And you see where police are trying to put a barrier between that. With Winston Churchill, that's a different story. Because Winston Churchill, yes, he was racist and stuff like that. But defacing a man who's done a lot for the country and helped us where we are now takes it slightly too far.
As a performing arts student, as someone who loves to act, my opinion on protesting is that it's an act against the world. You know, they say the world's a stage. I really do believe that. Acting is sort of my profession. It's what I do. It's what I want to do. And I'm so ingrained in political theatre right now that it's hard to separate the two. Protesting means as much to me as that does, because it's me using my voice and having it be accepted.
Young people have no fear. They say what they want to say, and I think they're more with it when it comes to issues of race and social injustice. You can reach so many people via social media, and they do lend their voices. They're not afraid to go on the streets and protest. They're not afraid to be allies to those who are being marginalized. They're not afraid to post on their social medias. They're not afraid to speak to their parents and other relatives of the older generations, just in order to educate them.
I think a lot of it comes down to the social media aspect and how our lives aren't just lived in person, but online now. Yeah, I definitely think that a lot of people do it for that social media attention grabbing aspect. They don't really educate themselves on the matter. There are those who do, and those are the ones who start these movements. And then there's a lot of people who just bandwagon onto it. Like if you think about the Blackout Tuesday on Instagram, that a lot of people didn't know what it was for, and it takes away from what the real meaning of it was.
I think like everyone, when you sort of get into like the mid stage in secondary school, you start to learn a lot more about the world, you could say, and a lot of the deep-rooted issues in it. So it sort of comes from there, and then obviously you are sort of influenced by your parents and your surroundings. So I think that's all where it comes from for me.
So let's go back to, like, say, when my mum was born, 1981, the Tories, Margaret Thatcher, in the 70s, how she took milk away, Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher. The Hillsborough disaster and how that was related to the media. You look at the poll tax, you look at the housing bill that happened. We look at the war on drugs in America, we look at the AIDS epidemic. We are the generation that grew up with 9/11 already in the public consciousness. The war in Iraq, the Mukdagan riots in 2011, but I remember that living in London. We've lived through a recession, all these scandals we've been through. We're the first generation who've had it worse off than our parents. We're the first generation who have only known of pain and agony and war. Go protest. Go use your voice while you still have it, and don't let anyone undermine who you are, because who you are is something so incredibly special.